Dadcast Nation. What's up, everybody? Greetings to everyone. Hey, this is a recap of our first season. Can you believe it? We've gone through 7 episodes, and we are now at the final episode of season 1, where we're going to look back at some of the highlights of our first season, and we'll also look at some of the previews for season 2. Let me start off by saying to everyone, I am so grateful, so thankful that you have taken time to listen to this podcast throughout these first 7 episodes. Your participation, your feedback, your listening it's been great. I mean, I can't even explain how great it's been. You guys have really made the Dadcast podcast very popular and very fulfilling for me as a host. So again, I want to say thank you. Thank you so much. And I really appreciate all of the support and love that we've received throughout season 1. Now let me start off by congratulating President-elect Joe Biden and Vice President-elect Kamala Harris for their historic 2020 election victory. I also want to congratulate all the elected officials across the country who have chosen to serve this nation through public service. I pray that our nation unites and that we find common threads of humanity and decency as we move forward after this tumultuous election process. As always, I'm going to start with a little bit of financial news for you to consider. Now, regardless of which side of the aisle you were on during the 2020 elections, analysts say that a declared winner and thus less election uncertainty paves the way for even higher U.S. stock prices. Even with President Trump's campaign as recently as today saying that they intend to challenge the election results in several battleground states, what we still find is that the stock market is reacting rather positively to the naming of a new president and vice president. Now you might say, why is that the case? It's because risk assets like certainty. Let me say that again for you. Risk assets like certainty. With President-elect Biden likely to run into opposition from Senate Republicans, less ambitious fiscal policy is expected. In that scenario, bonds will continue to rally as debt holders have less to fear from the higher inflation expectations that would follow from a faster economic recovery and increased debt issuance. Stock markets may be rejoicing at the prospects for a divided government following this U.S. election, but it's an open question as to what the Federal Reserve can do to spur an economic recovery in the aftermath of the pandemic. So the big takeaway here is that the market is going to take a positive swing. But here's the thing, you've got to be cautious because there's still litigation looming on the horizon in our political scene. So as always, the key, the idea, the goal is to buy low and sell high. And with that, let me say to you, happy investing. And now, are you ready for our final dad joke of the season? Let me get a drum roll, please. 2 men meet on opposite sides of a river. One shouts to the other, "I need you to help me get to the other side." The other guy replies, "You're already on the other side, dummy." All right. It's a dad joke, funny to some, not so much to others. All right, folks, so let's take a look back at season 1. In episode 1, we looked at some income opportunities that are pandemic proof, and we called it hustling in the pandemic. We talked about things like some of the rideshare services that you can participate in, and some of the other service entities that you can join. And we also talked about looking at things like Craigslist and some of the other online opportunities where you can find gigs for short-term income. So keep that in mind as you move through the rest of this pandemic that we're still in. that there are opportunities out there to increase your income. In episode 2, I was pleased to have my son, Lavelle Jr., join me to discuss how black families deal with disabilities as we celebrated his overcoming a severe speech impediment. We talked about the need for black families in particular to address issues that may come up, whether it's a mental disability, a physical disability, whatever the case might be, and being actively engaged in helping our young people, our children, meet and overcome any of the challenges that they face in life. In episode number 3, we talked about overcoming issues of self-confidence. And surprisingly, at least for me, the data shows that this episode was our most popular one. And so some of the takeaways from that episode were that, number 1, we have to have vision. Confident men often have motivation to reach specific goals. We also encouraged you to be honest with yourself, to know your strengths and weaknesses, and to not be afraid to work on your weaknesses and strive to improve your strengths. We talked about taking action. The same way that we strengthen a muscle is the way that we strengthen our confidence, and so you have to put that work in. We talked about the importance of taking care of yourself, living a healthy, balanced life, not overdoing anything, and being active. And then we talked about thinking positively, focusing on positive things. It doesn't mean that you ignore negative realities, but it does mean that you drive your focus towards positive realities. And then the last thing we talked about in that episode was that we have to stay open to learning. A confident man is one that is constantly learning, improving, and evolving. And overall, what we learned in that episode is that men, you have to have confidence, not arrogance, but confidence. And confidence is attractive to women. And so if you're a single man, put yourself in a position where you are bettering yourself, you're reaching your goals, you have confidence in yourself and in your abilities, and you go after those dreams that you have in front of you, and then God is going to send you that person that He wants in your life. Episode 4 was about PMS. Please make it stop. It was a personal pleasure for me as my wife joined me, Dr. Gabrielle Lemonnier, to discuss this important topic of PMS and its impact on relationships. We also learned that there is such a thing as IMS, irritable male syndrome, IMS. Which mimics many of the PMS symptoms in women. And so that was eye-opening. It was a pleasure to have that conversation, and I got a lot of positive feedback about it because it's something real that most relationships deal with, and people in households, whether it's a marital relationship, some other type of relationship, PMS typically plays some type of role in most relationships, and now we know that IMS is a very real issue that needs to be considered as well. In the 5th episode of the season, we took a good, hard look at chivalry, where we asked the question, is chivalry dead? We offered some tips on how to keep it alive and well, and we talked about the importance of men still being chivalrous, still doing those things that we know we ought to do, opening doors and being kind and courteous and helping when we can. Not because we think women are weaker, but because we treasure our women and we want to protect them and put them in the best possible position that they can be in. In episode 6, we discussed cultural sensitivity in the church. I had in the studio with me local pastor Brian Haynes from League City, and we held a very candid discussion about some of the pressing issues in the Christian community. We talked about worship and how we need to cross lines when it comes to worship because there are so many cultures that can be in one church. We talked about white privilege, and we talked about racial issues within the church, and I think it was very enlightening. It was a very open discussion, and I appreciate the feedback that we received from that episode. And then finally, in our last episode, we talked sports and politics with a couple of special guests, Curtis Brown and Calvin Menifee. Both of these guys were former college athletes, and they came in to help me dissect the subject of sports figures and their political voices. We looked at LeBron James and the position he's taken politically, and we asked the question and discussed the answer to this question as to whether sports figures, entertainers as well, should have a political voice, and if so, how should they steward that voice? And so we talked about that. It was very interesting. We debated our top 5 NBA players of all time, and we looked at how sports has an impact in our culture and in our society. So that's season 1 in a nutshell. If you haven't already listened to any of these episodes, or if you just want to go back and listen to them again, please go on any of your streaming networks and check them out. Again, I want to thank all of our listeners. We've had listeners, folks, this has been amazing. We've had listeners all across the United States, literally all across the United States, and in 6 other countries. We're getting weekly downloads from people in 6 other countries. That's amazing. That's a testament to how people are engaging this podcast and how information is powerful. And so I encourage you to stay connected to the Dadcast podcast and to look forward to season 2. Now, before I go any further, I cannot thank my lovely wife, Dr. Gabrielle Lemonnier, enough for her support and her input on all of these episodes. She's been the co-content creator, the one that I bounce my ideas off of, and I appreciate all that she's done. Thank you, honey. In season 2, we're going to look at more financial tips. We're going to have many more great dad jokes. I know you guys are loving those dad jokes. I'm loving it. It's fun. It's kind of corny, but it is a dad joke. And so we'll have many more of those dad jokes in season 2. We're going to look at some topics such as the impact of music on society. We're going to talk about Ratchet TV and analyze some of these network reality shows that are out in the market right now. We're going to look at some fun hobbies that you can engage in, and we're going to look at some stress relieving tactics as well. And then we will also cover more political insight and some relationship talk in season 2. All right, until next season begins in January 2021, put it on your calendar. Make sure you stay tuned. 2021, January 2021, the Dadcast podcast will return for season 2. So I want you to also stay tuned for our upcoming YouTube channel, where you might just find some behind the scenes looks at how we prepare for the Dadcast podcast. And perhaps we'll even show some sneak peeks at some of our season 1 interviews. Well, again, folks, it's been a pleasure having you as a part of our Dadcast Nation, and I can't wait to hear from you next season. The last thing that I want to say before I go off the air is I want to remind us that in this post-election season that we're in the words of President-elect Biden, we are not Democrats or Republicans. We are not enemies. We may have been opponents during this election, but we are not enemies. We are the United States of America. And I think that there's something to be said about the word united. We need to come together. We need to find common threads of decency and humanity that we can rally around. And even though we may not agree on policies and we may not agree on agendas, we can agree that we are all a part of this great nation. This is the greatest nation on the earth. And as a part of it, we should strive to get along with everyone that we can. We need peace. We need to move away from violent protests. There's nothing wrong with peaceful protest. It has a place in our democracy. It always has and it always will. but we have to find a way to come together, to join hands, and to move this country forward in the most positive way that we can. I encourage you to sit down and have conversations with people who are of different political views than you, so that you can learn why they view things the way that they do, what position they're coming from, and you can offer your position as well. And we can sit down together and discuss these things and understand each other a little better and cross all of these lines that are holding us apart. I really want this nation to be the best nation that it can be, as many of you do. And for those that are listening in other countries, I'm sure that your country has its issues as well. We are not a country here in the U.S. that thinks that we have it all right, even though it may sound like that through the media sometime. We do realize that there are things we can improve upon. And I'm sure your country can do the same. So be a catalyst in your country. Be a catalyst if you're an American citizen. Be a catalyst for humanity, where we draw peace to each other and not division. Sow cords of unity and not discord. And I'm sure that things will move in the right direction. And as always, I want to wish peace and blessings to each of you, and I'm out.